much, Mr Hollyburn, and it's always a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I want to congratulate genuinely the Honourable Member for Ceredigion for the tone in which he set in opening the remarks of this debate. And I just want to pay tribute to him, but also to his predecessor, Mark Williams, who for many years adopted the same tone of consensus in Wales and bringing people together to speak as Welsh MPs to this House of Commons. I want to congratulate also the NFU for providing a concise brief today, much of which the Honourable Member for Ceredigion referred to it, but I'll make no apologies in echoing some of those statistics that they provided us. Indeed, both farming unions have been very helpful to Members of Parliament over many years. But again, I want to pay tribute for the work that they do, to not just to their members, but to the communities of rural Wales. They play a very positive role in the social fabric of Wales, and to that I thank them. I want to concentrate my contribution today on an item that has been affecting my constituents for a long time, but certainly since 2010, when we've seen the over-centralisation of many of the UK government services moving away from rural and semi-rural areas to actual towns and cities of Wales and the UK. I do want to touch on food and drink and the importance of agriculture, on tourism, on connectivity, but I just wanted to highlight this point as I move on. The Welsh food and drink industry is, as the member for Ceredigion said, hugely important to our whole economy of urban and rural Wales. The backbone of the food industry comes from Welsh agriculture, and as has been said, it is a progressive, outward-looking industry which exports many of its produce across the European Union, 90% of it freely trading across the EU, including a third of Welsh lamb, the finest lamb in the United Kingdom, Mr Hollyburn, without a doubt. So it's hugely important, and I feel that we need to pay tribute and help and support our agriculture industry and our farmers. And I make a plea to the Minister, who I know listens carefully to what has been said and portrays our views as the Wales Office representative in government. But when he talks about securing EU funding to 2020, I want to challenge him now to go further than 2020, that our farming industry, post-Brexit, needs safeguarding, and it needs to ring-fence the money that we receive for the common agricultural policies. Not through the Barnett formula, because then we'd lose out, but actually ring-fence. And that's the challenge, I think, for the government. When it's talking about agriculture and rural Wales, it needs to safeguard the monies we receive now. Or he can tell us exactly how he's going to replenish that money. I think he... I certainly will.
I would beg the Honourable Gentleman also brings to bear what influence he can on Welsh Government to commit to maintain the same level of incomes for farmers when that money is transferred from Westminster under the devolved processes, whatever they may be.
Yes, well, that's the point I was making, that it shouldn't just go through the Barnett formula, because we'd lose out. We'd only get a certain percentage. I think we need like-for-like funding that we get from, because the European Union, when it negotiates these, looks at need in a way that I think is fairer for rural communities. So that's why I stress that point. I also want to talk about the importance of connectivity in the time that I've got here, because in North West Wales, and indeed in Ceredigion on the west coast of Wales, we suffer from a double whammy. We're not just rural communities, we are periphery communities, and many times a Cardiff-centric or a London-centric view predominates in the United Kingdom, so that we have to fight harder for services and for the connectivity that we deserve. Because I consider North West Wales to be the heart of the British Isles. I don't see it as a periphery. It's only a periphery if you're looking from down south, upwards towards it. It is the heart of the British Isles, because to our west is the island of Ireland, and Northern Ireland to our north is Scotland, and to our east is England. So I think we're very much the heart of the British Isles, and we need to start talking with that confidence. And when there's rollouts of programmes like 5G that we heard in the budget, it should be started and test piloted in difficult rural areas, not just in the large towns and cities of the United Kingdom. And I think that's the challenge for the Wales Office in the UK government. Swansea, yes, deserves its connectivity, but so too does rural Wales. If we're going to establish if the government is serious about spreading wealth across the United Kingdom, it needs to pilot projects in rural and periphery areas. I will give way.
Does he agree with the technology already exists? You can get this in the Alps, you can get it in Norway, you can get it in the Highlands of Scotland. So the technology is to some extent proven. Actually, what's required, and I'm sure the Minister will confirm, is political will.
Yes, he's asked me a question and he's answered it in the way that I would have. It does require political will, and that's what I'm asking for this government, not to go for the easy towns and cities each time it trials something, but to go for the rural and periphery areas. Now, tourism is hugely important. It's the fastest growing industry in the United Kingdom and in the world. And we have some of the best brands in Wales. Many people, visitors who come to Wales, come for our coastline, come for our national parks, our areas of outstanding natural beauty, the tranquility, and that's best seen on the Isle of Anglesey, the heart of the British Isles, and it very much is, in my opinion, the jewel in the crown of Welsh tourism. But there are challenges in rural Wales, serious challenges. If we are to develop a 21st century economy, then we do need 21st century tools to do the job. And in the digital age, as I said, we have got better connectivity in broadband and mobile, but it's still behind many parts of the UK. And I think we should address that problem. I think the Wales ministers really need to fight for that, because I give credit to the package that was put together, which is a partnership between the UK government, the Welsh government, the EU and BT to roll out. And I hope that EU money can be replenished in some way in the future, as EU money replenished in the future as well, because that has worked in many places. And I've been working with BT and with Welsh government, and indeed with the Welsh ministers, and the honourable gentleman here has been listening to what I and other members have been saying. So when I talk about rural Wales, I talk about interdependency with urban Wales as well. That's very important. And I come to my main and final point, Mr Hollowborn, is about the centralisation of UK government services. We've seen over the many years court closures. Now, court closures is not just the denial of access, local access to justice. It also damages local economies, because many of the local economies of solicitors' offices and the extra economy boost that those areas, courts around the courts have, is lost. And it's lost for good. And many personnel move from those areas to where the courts move. And we've seen HMRC, for example, move in its areas from the west to the east to central down to Cardiff. Well, that doesn't help rural economies in North Wales and North West Wales.
Well, I'm afraid it's an irresistible opportunity to talk about the appalling decision that's proposed by this government to shift HMRC from Wrexham in North Wales, my constituency, which has very many rural parts within it, to Cardiff city centre. Isn't that exactly the opposite of what we should be doing?
It is the opposite in what we should be doing, because the government talks, as many governments talk, about decentralisation and devolution of services, but it acts in the opposite way by pulling out services in rural areas. I mean, these rural areas have very competent people, have the skill set to deliver these jobs for many years. They're only going to save the government money, and in the long run, communities are getting left behind. And I just want to finish on this point, because it's nothing to do with the government, but we do need to get proper banking policy in this country, and the government to take some responsibility. But when banks, high street banks, close in rural areas and in small and larger towns, it rips the heart out of those communities. And these are communities that local government, Welsh government, and yes, the UK taxpayer is paying for. And yet, these banks just walk away. And we know what banks have done to our global economy and to recession across the world and in this country. So those banks need to have, I think, responsibilities, but we need to plug those gaps, because often buildings are left empty, jobs are lost, and the local high street suffers. So Rural Wales needs a strong voice. I think with Welsh MPs across the parties, we have that. We also need a government that is listening here in the UK and that is putting devolution into practice with real delivery of jobs and services in our rural communities, so that rural Wales, or even Wales, rural and urban, can compete on a level playing field with the rest of the United Kingdom. And I thank the honourable gentleman for Ceredigion for giving me the opportunity to say this, because I want to stand up in future and say how better we are in Wales, because we've worked together, rural and urban, to have the best place to live, to work and to visit in the whole of the United Kingdom.
Now